The Watchers and the Watched. Chief Observer Thane stood in the observation chamber of the Krillian research vessel, his crystalline eyes fixed on the blue planet rotating slowly below. For 15 years, he had watched Earth with the dedication of a scholar studying an ancient text. Every day brought new data, new insights into the species called humans. Yet after all this time, he still found them endlessly puzzling. The holographic display before him showed real-time footage from thousands of monitoring points across the planet. In one frame, humans waged war over resources. In another, they created breathtaking art. Here, they destroyed their own environment. There, they worked desperately to save endangered species. They were a contradiction wrapped in flesh, brilliant and foolish in equal measure. Thane's communication implant activated, and the voice of High Commander Verix filled his mind. The tone was urgent, cutting through his observations like a blade. Chief Observer Thane, you are ordered to evacuate your station immediately. The Zelka swarm has entered Sector 9. Earth lies directly in their projected invasion path. Thane felt his internal temperature drop, a physiological response his species experienced during moments of extreme stress. The Zelka swarm. The name alone carried weight across the galaxy. They were not conquerors in the traditional sense. They did not negotiate, did not take prisoners, did not establish colonies. They consumed. Every biological resource on a planet was harvested, processed, and absorbed into their collective biomass. Worlds they visited became barren rocks, stripped of all life. High Commander, what about the humans? We must warn them. Help them evacuate. There was a pause that stretched too long. When Verix responded, his mental voice carried the weight of a decision already made. The Krillian Empire has neither the resources nor the obligation to intervene. Earth is a pre-contact civilization. They possess no faster-than-light capability, no energy shields, no plasma weapons. By all measurements, they remain centuries away from meaningful spacefaring status. The Council has reviewed the situation. Earth cannot be saved. Thane's hands clenched into fists, an unusual display of emotion for a Krillian. There are 9 billion sentient beings on that planet. 9 billion lives. We cannot simply abandon them to extinction. We can and we must. The Zelka have already consumed 18 worlds in the past 2 months. Our fleets are stretched thin defending core systems. We cannot spare ships for a species that most analysts classify as primitive and self-destructive. Your reports themselves note their constant warfare, their environmental negligence, their inability to unite as a planetary civilization. The words stung because they were true. Thane's own assessments had painted humanity as promising but deeply flawed. They had the capacity for greatness, but they seemed determined to squander it on petty conflicts and short-sighted decisions. The official Krillian position was that humanity would likely destroy itself within a few centuries anyway. Why risk valuable resources on an inevitable outcome? I am giving you 6 hours to gather your research data and depart, Verix continued. The Zelka advanced scouts have been detected at the system's edge. The main swarm will arrive within 70 hours. I am sorry, Thane. I know you have grown attached to your subjects. But this is not negotiable. The connection severed, leaving Thane alone with his thoughts and the image of Earth spinning peacefully below, unaware of the doom approaching from the stars. But Earth was not unaware. Deep beneath the Colorado Rockies, inside a facility that appeared on no map and existed in no official database, Director James Hawthorne studied the same data that had prompted the Krillian evacuation. The command center around him hummed with activity. Hundreds of personnel worked at stations displaying technology that would have seemed like science fiction to anyone outside this room. Confirmed, Director, said Commander Lisa Park, his second-in-command. Multiple Zelka biosignatures detected at the system's edge. Configuration matches the patterns we've observed in intercepted communications. This is their standard pre-invasion sweep. The main swarm will follow in approximately 70 to 72 hours. Hawthorne was 68 years old, with silver hair and eyes that had seen things no civilian on Earth knew existed. He had been part of the Global Defense Initiative since its inception, recruited as a young aerospace engineer when the program was nothing more than a desperate hope and a handful of recovered alien technology. Status of the Krillian observation post, he asked. Their ship is preparing for departure. All indications suggest they're abandoning the system completely. Hawthorne allowed himself a bitter smile. Of course they are. They think we're primitives playing with sticks and stones. They have no idea what we've built. The story of how humanity came to this moment began 32 years ago, in 2045. A routine satellite deployment mission had discovered something impossible, a piece of technology in high orbit that could not have been created by human hands. It was small, roughly the size of a refrigerator, and it had been watching Earth. The discovery sent shockwaves through the highest levels of global government. Decades of speculation about alien life suddenly became concrete reality. But instead of announcing it to the world, leaders made a different choice. They realized that humanity was not ready for the truth. The planet was already struggling with climate change, resource scarcity, and political tensions. Adding the confirmed existence of watching aliens to that volatile mix could trigger panic or worse. So they created the Global Defense Initiative. In secret, the major powers of Earth set aside their public differences and began to cooperate. The alien surveillance device was reverse-engineered. Its technology opened doors that human science had barely begun to knock on. Faster-than-light communication. Advanced energy generation. Materials that could withstand forces previously thought impossible. But the GDI did not stop with reverse engineering. They innovated. They took alien concepts and pushed them in directions the original designers had never imagined. Human creativity, that uniquely chaotic spark that allowed them to see solutions where others saw only problems, transformed borrowed technology into something entirely new. Hawthorne had spent 3 decades overseeing the construction of humanity's hidden defense fleet. Shipyards were built in ocean trenches, in remote deserts, in hollowed-out asteroids. Thousands of engineers, pilots, and soldiers were recruited and trained, all sworn to secrecy. The public space programs continued as planned, maintaining the illusion of humanity's technological limitations. Meanwhile, in the shadows, Earth prepared for the day when watching turned to contact, and contact turned to conflict. Director, the Krillian ship has departed the system, Park reported. We're alone now. No, Hawthorne said quietly. We're ready. Activate Protocol Sentinel. Bring our fleet to full combat status. And get me a priority channel to all GDI command centers worldwide. It's time to tell everyone the truth. Across the planet, in hidden facilities identical to the one beneath Colorado, lights that had waited years for activation began to glow. In the Pacific Ocean, massive doors opened on the seafloor, and shapes that had never seen sunlight began to rise. On the far side of the moon, bases that had been constructed in absolute secrecy powered up their systems. In orbital space, weapons platforms disguised as defunct satellites shed their camouflage and locked onto distant targets. Earth's secret fleet consisted of 800 vessels, each one incorporating technology decades ahead of anything the public knew existed. They ranged from small fighters designed for speed and maneuverability to massive carriers that served as mobile command centers. The crown jewel was the Unity, a battleship 2 kilometers long that had taken 20 years to build and represented the absolute pinnacle of human engineering. Every ship was crewed by volunteers who had spent years training for a war they hoped would never come. They were the best humanity had to offer, drawn from every nation, every culture, every walk of life. They had families who thought they worked ordinary jobs. They had friends who believed their cover stories. And now, finally, their purpose would be revealed. Hawthorne's face appeared on screens across the planet as he prepared to address not just the GDI, but all of Earth. This was the moment when secrets kept for 3 decades would finally see light. He took a deep breath, thinking of all the people who had sacrificed so much to reach this point, and began to speak. But before his words could reach the public networks, alarms shrieked through the command center. Park's face went pale as she stared at her displays. Director, we have an emergency. The Zelka scouts just entered Mars orbit. They're not waiting for the main swarm. They're moving directly toward Earth, and they're accelerating. Hawthorne felt ice form in his chest. The scouts were early. The timeline had collapsed. How many? 50 bioships, medium class. ETA to Earth orbit, 40 minutes. There was no more time for speeches or explanations. Hawthorne's hand moved to the master control panel, where a single button waited. It was red, simple, and it had never been pressed. Until now. Launch everything, he said. It's time to show the galaxy what humanity can do. In high orbit, Thane had not left. Against orders, against logic, against every instinct for self-preservation, he had kept his ship in place. He could not abandon these people without at least witnessing their end. It was the least he owed them after 15 years of observation. When the Zelka scouts appeared on his sensors, he felt grief settle over him like a shroud. They were coming fast, eager to begin their harvest. Earth had no chance. In minutes, those ships would begin bombarding the planet, and the humans would die never knowing they had been watched, studied, and ultimately abandoned. Then something impossible happened. Thane's sensors exploded with new contacts. Ships were emerging from Earth, rising from the oceans, launching from the continents, appearing from behind the moon. Hundreds of them. Their energy signatures were unlike anything in his database. They moved with purpose and precision, forming battle formations that demonstrated clear military training. This cannot be, Thane whispered, his crystalline features reflecting the light of 800 human vessels arranging themselves between Earth and the approaching Zelka scouts. The lead Zelka bioship, a creature of living metal and organic tissue, transmitted its standard harvesting claim. It was a declaration that this world now belonged to the swarm, that all life would be collected and processed. The message had been sent to thousands of worlds before. It had never been answered with anything but fear. Earth's response was different. A single human ship, sleek and dangerous, accelerated toward the Zelka formation. It was broadcasting on all frequencies, and Thane quickly translated the message. It was simple, direct, and utterly human in its defiance. This is Commander Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Vessel Defiance. You have entered our system without permission. You have threatened our home. Leave now, or learn what happens when you underestimate humanity. The Zelka did not leave. They never did. Instead, they opened fire, launching bioplasma weapons that could melt through standard military hulls like acid through paper. The human ships moved. They did not scatter or flee. They attacked. Energy weapons that should not exist carved through Zelka bioarmor. Missiles with warheads based on principles Thane could not immediately identify struck with devastating precision. The humans fought like they had been doing this for years, their coordination perfect, their tactics brutal and effective. In the first 60 seconds of combat, 12 Zelka scouts were destroyed. The remaining 38, faced with unexpected resistance, did what they had not done in over a century of conquest. They retreated, breaking formation and scattering toward the outer system. The human ships pursued, hunting them down with methodical efficiency. Not one Zelka vessel escaped Earth's sphere of influence. Within 20 minutes, all 50 scouts had been neutralized, their organic components drifting as debris among the stars. Thane stared at his displays, his mind struggling to process what he had witnessed. Earth, the primitive world, had just destroyed a Zelka scouting force without losing a single ship. It was impossible. It was magnificent. It changed everything. His communication implant activated again, but this time the voice was not Krillian. It was human, speaking in surprisingly good Krillian dialect. Observation Vessel, this is Director James Hawthorne of Earth's Global Defense Initiative. We know you there. We've known about your presence for 32 years. I think it's time we had a conversation. Thane, still reeling from shock, managed to respond. Director Hawthorne, I do not understand. How is any of this possible? We have watched your world for decades. You should not have this technology. You should not have this capability. Hawthorne's image appeared on Thane's display, showing a human with silver hair and eyes that held both sorrow and pride. Observer Thane, humanity has learned many things over the years. But perhaps the most important lesson is this: never mistake patience for weakness. We knew we were being watched. We knew the galaxy considered us primitive. So we let you believe it while we prepared for the day when belief would meet reality. The Zelka main swarm is still coming, Thane said urgently. 5,000 ships. You have destroyed their scouts, but what you face next will be far worse. I know, Hawthorne replied calmly. That's why I'm contacting you. We need intelligence. Fleet compositions, tactical preferences, hive mind communication frequencies. Everything your people have learned about the Zelka. We're willing to fight, Observer Thane, but we would prefer to fight smart. Thane felt something shift inside him, a decision crystallizing that would likely end his career and possibly his life. But as he looked at Earth, at the civilization that had just rewritten every assumption he held about primitive species, he knew what he had to do. I will send you everything we have, he said. And Director Hawthorne, for what it is worth, I am sorry we left you to face this alone. You didn't leave us alone, Observer. You're still here. That's what matters now. Hawthorne paused, then added with a slight smile, besides, we were never really alone. We had each other, and that turned out to be enough. As Thane began transmitting classified Krillian military data to Earth, he wondered what other surprises humanity had waiting for the galaxy. The Zelka swarm was coming, the most feared force in known space, but for the first time in years, Thane felt something unexpected blooming in his chest. Hope. The storm breaks. The 72 hours passed like a countdown to the end of the world. Across Earth, the truth that had been hidden for 3 decades finally emerged into the light. Director Hawthorne's address to humanity was broadcast on every channel, in every language, revealing the existence of alien life, the years of secret preparation, and the imminent threat approaching from the darkness between stars. The reaction was not what the psychologists had predicted. Yes, there was fear. Yes, there was anger at the deception. But there was also something else, something the analysts had underestimated. There was unity. When faced with extinction, the old divisions that had defined human history suddenly seemed insignificant. National borders, political ideologies, religious differences, all of it faded against the simple truth that they were one species, on one planet, facing an enemy that wanted to erase them completely. In Tokyo, millions gathered in the streets, not in panic, but in vigil. In New York, volunteers flooded recruitment centers, demanding to help in any way they could. In Mumbai, engineers worked around the clock to convert civilian factories to military production. In São Paulo, doctors prepared emergency medical facilities. In Johannesburg, teachers explained to children why the sky might soon fill with fire, and why they should not be afraid because humanity was fighting back. The Global Defense Initiative, no longer hidden, became the rallying point for Earth's defense. Director Hawthorne found himself coordinating not just military forces but the entire collective will of 9 billion people. It was terrifying and inspiring in equal measure. In the command center beneath Colorado, Commander Lisa Park stood before a holographic display showing the solar system. A massive red cloud was approaching from the outer darkness, each dot representing a Zelka bioship. Director, final count is in. 5,347 vessels. They'll reach Mars orbit in 6 hours, Earth orbit in 12. Hawthorne studied the display with the calm of someone who had already accepted the impossible odds. Their intelligence from Observer Thane had been invaluable. They now understood that the Zelka operated as a hive mind, with command nodes that coordinated sections of the swarm. Destroy enough nodes, and the swarm would lose cohesion. But the nodes were protected by hundreds of ships, and Earth's fleet numbered only 800. What's the status of our defensive grid? Hawthorne asked. All orbital platforms are active and charged. Lunar bases report full readiness. The asteroid fortifications are in position. Ground-based shield generators are online in all major population centers. Park paused, her expression troubled. Director, even with everything we have, the mathematical models are not in our favor. We can hurt them, maybe even stop the first wave, but attrition will eventually. I know, Hawthorne interrupted gently. But mathematics has never been humanity's strong suit. We're better with miracles. He turned to address the entire command center, his voice carrying to every station. All personnel, this is Director Hawthorne. In a few hours, we will face the greatest test in human history. The enemy coming toward us has consumed 18 worlds. They believe we will be the 19th. They believe we are primitive, weak, divided. Let us show them how wrong they are. Let us show them what humanity becomes when we stop fighting each other and start fighting for each other. Stations to battle alert. And someone get me a line to the Unity. It's time for Commander Chen to earn her place in the history books. Aboard the Unity, humanity's flagship battleship, Commander Sarah Chen stood on the bridge surrounded by her crew. She was 42 years old, had 3 children she had not seen in 6 months, and held the record for highest simulation scores in the entire GDI fleet. The Unity was her ship, 2 kilometers of advanced technology and human determination forged into a weapon unlike anything the galaxy had seen. All stations report ready, Commander, said her tactical officer, Lieutenant James Rodriguez. The fleet is formed and waiting for your command. Chen looked at the main display showing Earth, beautiful and fragile, the home of everyone she loved. Broadcast this on all channels, military and civilian. I want Earth to hear it. I want the Zelka to hear it. And I want the galaxy to hear it. She took a breath and spoke. This is Commander Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Fleet. To our people below, know that we stand between you and annihilation. We will not falter. We will not surrender. We will fight with everything we have because you are worth fighting for. To the Zelka swarm, know that you have made a fatal mistake. You came here expecting prey. You will find predators. And to anyone else watching from the stars, remember this day. Remember that when the monsters came for Earth, humanity said no. The Zelka main swarm reached Mars orbit exactly on schedule. They did not slow down. They did not scan for defenses. They simply came, a living tide of biomechanical horror that had swept across the galaxy leaving death in its wake. At the center of the swarm, aboard the largest bioship, Hive Commander Zarthul processed the destruction of his scout force with cold analysis. Zarthul was not an individual in the traditional sense. He was a node, a concentration of the collective consciousness that allowed the Zelka to think, plan, and adapt. His physical form was massive, a fusion of flesh and metal that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. Around him, thousands of lesser Zelka moved with perfect synchronization, each one a cell in the greater organism. The loss of 50 scouts was anomalous but not concerning. The humans had demonstrated unexpected capability, but the main swarm represented overwhelming force. 5,000 ships against 800. The mathematics were simple. The outcome was inevitable. Advance formation, proceed to harvest protocols, Zarthul's consciousness transmitted across the hive mind. Eliminate all resistance. Begin planetary processing once orbital space is secured. The swarm moved forward, crossing into Earth's defensive perimeter. That was when humanity revealed its first surprise. The asteroids that littered the space between Mars and Earth suddenly came alive. What the Zelka had registered as natural debris were actually camouflaged weapons platforms. Hundreds of them opened fire simultaneously, railguns launching projectiles at relativistic speeds, plasma cannons creating corridors of superheated death. The outer edge of the Zelka formation dissolved in fire and destruction. But the swarm did not stop. It absorbed the losses and pressed forward, bioships regenerating damage, reforming ranks, adapting to the threat. For every Zelka vessel destroyed, 5 more took its place. The asteroid platforms fought valiantly but were soon overwhelmed, consumed by the advancing tide. On the lunar surface, massive cannon installations that had been hidden in craters for decades opened their shutters and added their firepower to Earth's defense. The moon itself became a fortress, pouring destruction into the approaching swarm. Zelka ships died by the dozens, then by the hundreds, but still they came. They're breaking through the outer defenses, Park reported from the command center. Lunar bases are holding but taking casualties. First wave of the swarm will reach high orbit in 30 minutes. Hawthorne activated his connection to the Unity. Commander Chen, the stage is yours. Show them what the fleet can do. Chen smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. All ships, this is Unity Actual. Formation Delta 7. Engage at will. And remember, if you're going to hit them where it hurts. Earth's fleet moved forward to meet the swarm. They did not form a defensive wall. Instead, they scattered into smaller groups, using tactics that Observer Thane's intelligence had suggested. The Zelka expected direct confrontation, strength against strength. Humanity gave them chaos instead. Fighter squadrons darted through the swarm like schools of fish, their energy weapons precisely targeting the gaps in bioarmor that Thane had identified. Frigates unleashed missile swarms that split into thousands of micro-munitions, overwhelming Zelka point defenses. Cruisers employed weapons that disrupted the bioelectrical signals the Zelka used for communication, creating pockets of confusion in the hive mind. And the Unity, massive and terrible, carved through the swarm like a sword through flesh. Its main cannon fired concentrated energy beams that could punch through 3 Zelka ships in a single shot. Its point defense grid created a sphere of destruction that vaporized anything that came close. Commander Chen piloted her ship with the skill of someone who had trained for this moment her entire life, and the Zelka died in her wake. But for every victory, there was a cost. The GDI frigate Dauntless took critical damage and had to withdraw. The fighter squadron Crimson Wing lost 6 pilots in a desperate engagement near the lunar surface. The orbital platform Guardian 7 was overwhelmed and destroyed, taking 50 personnel with it. Humanity was winning individual battles but losing the war of attrition. In his command center, Hawthorne watched the tactical display with growing concern. They had destroyed over 1,000 Zelka vessels, an achievement that would have seemed impossible hours ago. But 3,000 remained, and Earth's fleet was down to 600 operational ships. The mathematics he had dismissed earlier were asserting themselves with brutal clarity. "Director, we need to change the game," Park said urgently. "If we continue trading ships like this, we'll be overwhelmed in 3 hours." Hawthorne studied the data Thane had provided, searching for an advantage, anything they could exploit. The Zelka operated through hive nodes, command ships that coordinated sections of the swarm. Destroy a node, and several hundred ships would lose coordination temporarily. But the nodes were in the center of the formation, protected by layers of bioships. Unless there was a way to reach them. "Get me Observer Thane," Hawthorne said suddenly. When the Krillian's crystalline face appeared on the display, Hawthorne spoke quickly. "The hive nodes, how do they communicate with each other? What frequencies do they use?" Thane's eyes widened with understanding. "They use bioquantum entanglement, operating on specific harmonic frequencies. But Director, even if you could jam those frequencies, you would need to be within the formation itself." "I know." Hawthorne turned to Park. "How many ships do we have with prototype quantum jammers?" 12. "They were experimental, barely tested." 12 is enough. "Get me Commander Chen." When Chen's face appeared, Hawthorne outlined the plan. It was desperate, dangerous, and had a high probability of failure. Chen listened without interruption, and when he finished, she nodded once. "I'll need volunteers. Crews willing to fly directly into the center of the swarm with untested equipment and no guarantee of survival." "How many do you think will volunteer?" Hawthorne asked. Chen's smile returned, fierce and proud. "All of them, Director. Every single one." She was right. Within minutes, 12 ships had volunteered for what everyone was calling the Hail Mary run. They were a mix of frigates and destroyers, fast enough to penetrate the swarm but heavily armed enough to fight through. Each ship was equipped with a quantum jammer that theoretically could disrupt Zelka hive mind communications if they could get close enough to the command nodes. "This is Commander Chen to all Hail Mary vessels. Our target is the 3 largest bioships in the center of the swarm. Thane's data indicates they're the primary hive nodes for this sector. We go in fast, we hit them hard, and we don't stop until those jammers are active or we're dead. Earth is counting on us. Let's not disappoint. The 12 ships broke formation and accelerated directly toward the heart of the swarm. The rest of the fleet moved to support them, creating a corridor of covering fire. It was not enough. Zelka vessels converged on the penetrating ships like antibodies attacking an infection. The destroyer Resolute took catastrophic damage and exploded, taking 30 souls with it. The frigate Horizon lost its engines and had to be abandoned, its crew escaping in lifepods while Zelka bioweapons tore their ship apart. But 10 ships made it through. They emerged in the center of the swarm, surrounded by thousands of enemy vessels, and found themselves facing 3 massive bioships each over 5 kilometers long. These were the Hive nodes, pulsing with bioluminescent patterns as they coordinated the swarm's assault on Earth. The 10 human ships, tiny by comparison, activated their quantum jammers. The effect was immediate and catastrophic for the Zelka. The harmonic frequencies that allowed the hive mind to function were suddenly flooded with interference. Coordination collapsed. Ships that had moved with perfect synchronization suddenly became confused, firing on each other, colliding, drifting aimlessly. 3,000 Zelka vessels became 3,000 individual entities, each one trying to understand what had happened to the voice in their mind that told them what to do. All fleet vessels, this is Unity, Chen broadcast. The swarm has lost coordination. Attack pattern Omega. Target the hive nodes. We end this now. Earth's remaining ships surged forward, exploiting the chaos. They targeted the massive hive nodes, pouring everything they had into those critical vessels. The Zelka tried to respond, tried to protect their commanders, but without coordination they were vulnerable in ways they had never experienced. The first hive node died in a bloom of biomatter and metal, its destruction sending shockwaves through the swarm. The second followed minutes later, overwhelmed by concentrated fire from the Unity and its support vessels. The third, Zarthal's command ship, fought desperately but was already fatally damaged. In his final moments, the Hive commander transmitted a message across all frequencies, a warning to the greater Zelka collective. Beware the Terrans. They are not prey. They are not primitive. They are something new. Something dangerous. Then the third node exploded, and the Battle of Earth was over. In the aftermath, the solar system was littered with debris from both sides. Earth had lost 237 ships and over 8,000 personnel. 41 orbital platforms were destroyed. The lunar bases would need months of repairs. But humanity had survived. The Zelka swarm, feared across the galaxy, had been defeated. On Earth, 9 billion people looked up at the sky and saw the flashes of light that marked the end of the battle. In cities and villages, on islands and continents, people wept with relief, with grief for the fallen, with pride for what they had accomplished together. In the Colorado Command Center, Hawthorne sat heavily in his chair, suddenly feeling every one of his 68 years. Park approached with a tablet showing casualty reports, damage assessments, and something else. Director, we're receiving messages from across the galaxy. Word of what happened here has spread. 17 civilizations have sent congratulations. 6 have requested military consultations. And the Krillian High Command wants to speak with you immediately. Hawthorne looked at Observer Thane, whose ship still orbited Earth. The Krillian had proven himself an ally when it mattered most. Put the High Commander through. Commander Verix's face appeared on the display, and for the first time in his career, Hawthorne saw a Krillian express genuine surprise. Director Hawthorne, the Krillian Empire extends its official recognition of Earth as a sovereign and advanced civilization. We also wish to discuss a potential alliance. The Zelka swarm has plagued the galaxy for centuries. You have demonstrated that they can be defeated. We would learn from you, and in return, we offer our friendship and our support. Hawthorne glanced at Park, who looked as exhausted as he felt but was smiling. He turned back to the display. High Commander, humanity accepts your offer. But understand this, we will never again be underestimated. We will never again be abandoned. We fought for our home, and we won. Now we're ready to take our place among the stars. Not as primitives seeking guidance, but as equals demanding respect. Verix nodded slowly. Understood, Director. And if I may say so, the galaxy is fortunate that humanity chose to be our ally rather than our enemy. After the transmission ended, Hawthorne walked to the window overlooking the command center where hundreds of people were celebrating, crying, holding each other. They had done the impossible. They had united a divided world and defeated an enemy that seemed unstoppable. Commander Chen's voice came over the speaker. Director, the Unity is returning to Lunar Dock. Permission to stand down the fleet. Permission granted, Commander. Tell everyone they did humanity proud. Tell them the galaxy was watching, and we showed them who we really are. As the fleet began its return to base, as Earth started the long process of recovery and rebuilding, as humanity prepared to step onto the galactic stage as a major power, Hawthorne allowed himself a moment of reflection. They had been called primitive, been dismissed as insignificant, been abandoned to their fate. And they had proven every assumption wrong. The Terrans were no longer the watched. They were the watchers, and the galaxy would never underestimate them again. Above Earth, Observer Thane looked down at the planet that had rewritten everything he thought he knew about primitive civilizations. He had spent 15 years studying them from a distance. Now, finally, he would get to know them as equals. The age of human isolation was over. The age of humanity among the stars had begun. And across the galaxy, in 1,000 civilizations, on 1,000,000 worlds, beings looked at their own defensive preparations and asked themselves a question that would define the future. If the humans could do this, what else were they capable of? The answer, as time would prove, was anything they set their minds to.